back to
Somebody's
Chair
trying.
Harrington.
All righty then. So we have a few items on our afternoon agenda, and the first one is probably our most straightforward one. So welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of County Commissioners. My name is Mira Samantha. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services. I use she, her pronouns.
And you just can't get enough of us.
I cannot. This is how I love to spend my Tuesdays. And actually, I'm
too.
really excited today because we are fortunate to have Kirsten Oster with us, who's a supervisor with our Developmental Disabilities Division. And you may recall Kirsten helping present for the DD proclamation just a short while back. So this is Kirsten's first time presenting council appointments. So she's going to speak to your board about recommendations for the Developmental Disability Advisory Council appointments and has a brief presentation and entertains any questions after that. So Kirsten, go ahead.
Thank you, Mira, and good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board of Commissioners. As Mira said, my name is Kirsten Oster, and I'm the Program Supervisor for the Developmental Disabilities Division and the designated support staff to our Developmental Disabilities Advisory Council. So this afternoon, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the council, go over our 2023 recruitments and recommendations. So the DD Council is a 15-member council that serves in an advisory capacity to the Washington County Department of Health and Human Services. The council provides input on program development, planning, monitoring, and funding matters. The council meets one time a month and at arranged upon time. This year, a majority of our meetings have been on Zoom due to the pandemic. However, we were able to support one hybrid meeting where we hosted an in-person option. The council's plan for this coming year includes offering a hybrid meeting option once per quarter. Members of the DD Council are advocates, people accessing developmental disability services, professionals in the field, provider representatives, and family members. Positions on the council are not specified in the bylaws, and current council members are focused on leading with equity and building a council that includes a diverse and broad representation reflective of our Washington County community. A priority of the council this year is to raise awareness to key issues impacting intellectual and developmental disabilities community and advocacy for Spanish-speaking family members and service providers. A few examples of key issues include ensuring adequate funding to local developmental disability programs, finding affordable housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, a continued emphasis on employment, and providing input on the division's development of the 2 American Rescue Plan Act positions, which will be focused on community outreach and supporting Spanish-speaking families. So for this year, this recruitment period, we had 4 vacancies with 4 applicants, so we were very lucky. One of our applicants is seeking reappointment, with 3 new applicants being recommended for first-time appointment. We have invited all applicants to recent council meetings and have included them in our resource sharing activities, such as the upcoming Developmental Disabilities Resource Fair this Saturday. The HHS department recommends that reappointments for Catherine Katie Morin and recommends the new appointments of John Saito, Dulce Ojeda, and Donald Scott to the Developmental Disabilities Advisory Council. I've put together a brief summary of each candidate, beginning with our new applicants seeking first appointment. John is our first new applicant. John is applying for the first time to the Developmental Disabilities Council for Washington County. According to his application, John is a man who lives in District 2, and in his demographics indicated he is Asian American. His adult daughter has autism, and John is passionate about being an advocate for her and others who are unable to advocate for themselves. John brings with him a vast majority of experiences as being one of his daughter's primary caregivers, as well as his experience as a current member of the Oregon Commission on Autism Spectrum Disorders new subcommittee for social services and adult supports. Additionally, John is a member of the Oregon Commission on Autism Spectrum Disorders subcommittee for individual interventions, Oregon Home Care Commission's Workforce Resiliency, Sustainability, and Growth Collaborative, and is a voting member on the Oregon Home Care Commission's Developmental Disabilities and Mental Health Committee. John is really involved with a lot of state things. John's insights and his statewide advocacy work will be a great asset to the Washington County DD Advisory Council. Next is Dulce Ojeda. Dulce is applying for the first time, and according to her application, Dulce is a woman who lives in District 4, and in her demographics indicated she is of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. She is a mother of a child with a developmental disability. Dulce is currently working for a local school district to provide bilingual support to children in a life skills classroom. In addition, Dulce is passionate about being able to provide equal service opportunities for all individuals who experience disabilities. She would like the opportunity to serve on the advisory council to help create a community that grows closer and addresses people's individual needs. Donald Scott is the third new applicant, and Donald is also applying for the first time. According to his application, Donald is a man who lives in District 2, and his demographic indicated he is also Asian American. Donald has Down syndrome and accesses developmental disability services. Donald has lived in Washington County his whole life and wants to be an advocate for his community and others with disabilities. Donald has been on the board of a local provider, Self-Determination Resources, or SDRI, participated in Special Olympic events, and has been working for Quiet Waters as the janitor for 23 years. Donald has been able to provide the council with firsthand experience as a person accessing services and support the division's efforts to keep improving service delivery. Katie Morin is the only applicant and our last applicant seeking reappointment to the council. Katie is applying for her second term, and according to her application, Katie is a woman who lives in District 4, and her demographics indicated that she is white. Currently, Katie is the co-executive director of Quiet Waters Outreach, a local nonprofit that provides respite opportunities and attendant care supports to individuals and families in our community. During her most recent term with the DD Advisory Council, Katie served as the chair of the council and provided continuous dedication and leadership to our council members and the division. A passion of Katie's is being involved in the community and advocating for others. Katie would like to continue supporting her community by providing valuable input as a respected provider and leader in the field, and as an advocate for a family member who has a disability. So thank you for this opportunity to present our candidates for the Developmental Disabilities Advisory Council. As a staff member that has been working with our council more recently, I'm excited to be able to support this wonderful, diverse group of individuals who represent the community we support in Washington County. The new candidates have already been able to contribute in a meaningful way, and if appointed, will provide the council and our division valuable insight and guidance as the division continues to lead with equity. I am happy to take any questions from the board.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't, but this obviously is, you know, a labor of love from these folks, and it's an important service. And so I'm always impressed. That's outside of my sphere of understanding, but I'm certainly glad these people are willing to do that. So
Absolutely.
you bet.
I'd just like to say thank you for your recruitment efforts. It's really a strong pool, and I support it.
Thank you.
No, that's fine, but
So
yeah, no one from District 3, interesting.
here you've got, well, you have one still serving for
Yeah.
this.
one
Yes,
that's right.
yeah.
Not
That's
not
District 2.
yeah. District 2, yeah.
So what an incredible roster. Really appreciate the work that you put in, including with current members to help encourage others to provide this valuable service. I just want to mention a couple of things. I appreciate, you know, I'm always on the lookout for who are the longer tenured ones and
Yes.
rotation. In this case, I want to note, I appreciate that Cindy Wilkins has been serving as a whole roster of new parents of representatives have been on the committee. Several of them from 2022 to 2025. So I think that's good. I had never noticed before this section midterm vacancies.
Yes.
What is that all about?
Uh,
Help educate me. Maybe I just haven't noticed it in other charts.
Unfortunately, this year, Susan had to resign midterm due to some health concerns. So
Midterm vacancies, think
Mhm.
about it. Catherine. Oh, I get it. Those dots are now connecting. So, thank you. And the last question I had, I didn't write it down. You talked about hybrid meetings 1x per quarter. So do you target a specific month where you're saying instead of a fully in-person meeting, you'll have one per quarter that's hybrid? Is that what you mean?
yes.
Oh, cool.
So for example, our June meeting is going to be hybrid. So we're going to offer an in-person option at our Service Center East location to welcome the hopefully newly appointed members. And also hoping sometime in the fall, just to keep those connections going.
Do you rotate the location of the meeting?
We have our last hybrid in-person one was December of 2022, and that was at our service center. Excuse me, that was at our Elam Young Parkway office.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Neat. Good experience. Well, good job here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will return on June 6th at your regular session.
June.
Yes.
Not ready for June. But thank you for getting my mind there, Mira.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Oh, boy, June. Yes, okay.
I just want some sunshine to come with it. I don't care.
Oh, no kidding.
I don't
Continued
care what
sunshine.
month you call it.
Continued sunshine.
So Clerk Moss, oh, my gosh, we're a
We're-
little early. How did
minutes.
that happen?
I just feel like this would go.
Mhm, he's gonna be-
So you all are ready for us? Oh, good. I'm not ready, but you're ready, so that's all that counts.
I say we're ready, but today has been one of those days where you thought you know what you were going to say, and then every 2 hours it changes.
Oh, well, thank you for my colleagues. I'm finally up to speed on the state government Secretary of State resignation, so. Yes,
One
Things
of
must
two
be
big
buzzing.
announcements today. It's been an interesting Tuesday, and when they say that you live in interesting times, they're not being polite. So good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. Erin Doyle, Senior Government Relations Manager, here today to talk about all of the ongoing work and to seek your direction on a letter in particular, because I'd like to take one of those policy questions that we asked you off the table, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm joined, of course, by my colleague, Zakir Khan, who may have to jump out to get to a legislative meeting. So if he suddenly disappears in the middle of the meeting, it is because he is doing the work we have him doing. So next slide, please. So today's agenda is obviously we continue to do the session overview and then talk priorities and hot topics. There we have the drafted letter to the Ways and Means Committee. That's pretty extensive. We'll go over that. I am aware of some typos that were in that letter, so thank you, Chair, but we'll seek your direction in moving forward and getting that signed and submitted, and then talk about next steps. So next slide, please. Just really quickly in the session overview, right now we're starting to see the budget process starting to prioritize some things. Some smaller budgets are making it through the legislature. Bills are still working that are strictly policy from first chamber to second chamber. But really what everyone is doing right now, besides wondering if there's going to be a walkout again this session based on some of the more controversial bills that do not directly impact Washington County. So between that and the revenue forecast, there's just a lot of pins and needles down here in Salem about what the next month of session is going to look like. But it's still moving right up until it does. So next slide, please. So today for the priorities and hot topics, Doctor's going to talk about health and human services updates. I will talk through some land use and transportation, which has, if you saw my email this morning, some late breaking news from the slide. A little bit about the economic development work that we're doing, particularly around gain share, and then discuss the Ways and Means letter. Next slide. Zakir, take it away.
Cool. For the record, my name is Zakir Khan, Government Relations Manager here at Washington County. Commissioners, good to see you all again. And agree with you on the sun comment. I would love to see the sun today as well. Just a couple of updates to share. First, just off the top, most of the Health and Human Services bills are sitting in the Ways and Means Committee right now, awaiting a public hearing and work session. So as we start to see what the revenue forecast looks like later this month, we'll start to see the wheels rolling on a number of different bills. But I do want to provide the Board of Commissioners with an update on just kind of two things that have been floating around within the past week. The first update is on the 988 funding bill. This is House Bill 2757. This received a hearing in the House Revenue Committee last week, and it deals with creating funds to fund the crisis line 988 crisis line services and statewide coordinated crisis system. There were largely people who were testifying in support of the measure during the public hearing. However, there were some technical aspects of the bill that still needed a remedy, and the committee members on the House Revenue Committee are going to be doing a deeper dive in the revenue components of the measure to potentially amend and also see some equity aspects that they were concerned about. The second item that I'm going to be discussing is a proposal that's been put forth by the Association of Community Mental Health Programs. They've put together a $300 million budget ask that would put together some funding for the behavioral health world. And it would potentially have positive impacts for Washington County. Namely, they are asking for $163 million to fund mental health residential and substance use disorder bed capacity. So this would be a fund that we would be eligible to apply for to get funding for the CAT if our capital construction request has not come out fully funding the gap that currently exists. That bill also has additional elements that are beneficial to the county, including a request for about $62 million for $62 million for supportive housing, as well as some additional funds for behavioral health workforce. So I'll just pause there to see if there's any questions or comments about what I just presented about.
Well, I'll just turn the finger back to myself. I can't follow that whole thing about bill numbers. I get the value out of all of it. So I'm just like, okay. Sounds good. But
Yeah,
I sure hope there wasn't an ask in there that I might have missed.
No, Commissioner.
So, yeah.
There's no ask. I just wanted to update you in terms of where we are in the process and a number of different things.
Okie dokie.
My only comment would be, we talked about two of those subjects today, how CAT would get funding and where we're getting it and also behavioral. So that's a good thing. I'm with the chair. I don't know where this P is under the shell, and I guess you're watching it for us, so.
We are.
Yeah, all right.
A lot of different pots, both on the federal side as well as on the state side. So we're just trying to get the pots all together to give us the funding that we need for the CAT.
Great.
Any other? Great, cool. With that, I'll turn it over back to Aaron.
Mostly in Aaron Doyle Bay. So, next slide, please. So there's a couple of bills on this slide, and I'll go quickly through the land use bill, but there's one that is not on the slide that I think the chair had forwarded some information about that hasn't been on the slides, but I'll save that for the end of this particular slide. But first, on land use, our bill, the 3197, we finally had a public hearing related to the amendment in the -3. This was brought up in the Friday facts that LUC provided.
Could you please remind us what the bill does first?
Sure.
Thank you.
So House Bill 3197 is fixing something related to a LUBA decision. The land use and transportation clear and objective standards inside the urban growth boundary for Metro was those standards were challenged in front of the Land Use Board of Appeals, who found that the requirement to have clear and objective standards applied not just to those Goal 5 lands inside the urban growth boundary, but to all lands where a piece of housing might possibly be built.
Yep.
House Bill 3197 is intended to clarify that those clear and objective standards only apply inside an urban growth boundary. Unfortunately, the bill will not pass with that broad of an exclusion, because the home builders feel that that somehow is intended to negate the amount of housing that needs to be built. But so there is an amendment now that has been proposed, the -3, I believe, that would say that clear and objective standards apply for housing that is being built in urban unincorporated communities, which are a defined term, which Washington County does not technically have any of, as far as we can tell in our comprehensive plan. In the rural exception areas for housing, so rural residential areas, which we do have in rural Washington County, and then in other what are called non-resource lands. So essentially, it would apply clear and objective standards for any housing application that's brought outside of on resource lands, which are farm and forest lands or farm forest mixed use lands. The bill is sitting in House rules because it got pulled off the floor because it was not going to be able to get a passing vote to move it over to the Senate side. The goal now is to get it to work session. So while it is not our preferred solution, it is still better than the amount of work it will take for us to comply with the LUBA decision at this point in time. So that's the update on that. Yeah, why make things easy? On the transportation side, this bill was brought up. It was recently introduced, but I believe has been negated as of press releases this morning. So House Bill 3614.
Can we pause there for a second?
Please.
Because I haven't caught up with what your email was. So you're going to need to fill us all in.
That was
We've
my
been
plan.
in other meetings. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
that was
you.
my plan. So House Bill 3614 is a bill that would pause all tolling on all roads. Essentially, it says highways, but it means, and highway is a very broad definition, until 2026, except for any I-5 bridges that cross the Columbia River. Very specific. And then also created a task force with an assigned membership to take on and make recommendations related to tolling policies that would apply across the state. As of this morning, via a press release that was sent out by Representative Neron's office, the governor has intervened and has decided to directly put that pause on tolling using her executive authority, which she has as the executive administrator of the ODOT governing body. And so therefore, we are expecting to see a press release from the governor's office this afternoon confirming that and making very clear which tolling has been paused. It is our expectation, but it is not abundantly clear in the press release that that pause refers to the I-205 tolling, and the I-5 bridge replacement would remain tollable if they get to that point in the process. It also will call for what they are calling a special subcommittee to the legislature's Joint Transportation Committee that will be meeting over the interim to discuss the same types of policies. We have not seen an announcement of the makeup of that subcommittee or what the plan would be moving forward. I think right now they are putting the pieces in order. And I think that the press release from Representative Neron's office came out a little bit ahead of the rest of the pieces that needed to move forward. And I think that relates in part to the news this morning about Secretary of State's decision to resign, kind of subsumed people's capacity to put out the press releases related to polling. So at this point in time, House Bill 3614 has become, unless something changes in the intervening time when the governor releases confirmation that she has decided to pause tolling, it has become a moot bill essentially. So,
well, and that's my concern. If I understand you correctly, the governor's office has signaled an intention, but that it hasn't been ordered yet. So what I'm trying to do very quickly is bring up your presentation, because there is one slide that's teeny tiny to read, the calendar one, because there is some kind of deadline this Friday.
correct.
So we have only one opportunity of today for our conversation. That's post work session, and then 19th is the second chamber work session. So I'm not 100% following what the deadline is this Friday. So I don't want to short circuit us having conversation about 3614 is my point.
And your concern is that if the governor does not put that pause, we haven't had the discussion.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So, so talking about this 3614 idea, I am as displeased as a boatload of other people about how there have been lack of public hearings and engagement for local elected officials, community members to have their concerns heard, let alone addressed. And that's why, as one of five, I am interested in supporting the pause aspect. I'm not 100% enamored with creating yet again another task force, but it sounds like this task force is, we already have so many committees working on tolling policies. I'm like, gosh, one more? So I'm a bit concerned about another task force working on tolling policies. But at a minimum, I'm interested in us at least writing a letter saying, or as one of 5 weighing in, that I would like to see this pause on the tolling of 205 because it's causing some real problems in our communities. Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
First of all, Aaron, thank you for the updates and to let us know what the landscape looks like at this point in time. What my thoughts are is that I am really uncomfortable with the way that ODOT has handled this process. And I believe that that's what we saw in the letter from, that was signed by, I believe it came from Representative Neron and everybody else. And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if the governor were to put this pause on, that's really directed at ODOT. And so I would be supportive of a process that improves the communication. I'm not necessarily saying that I'm not in favor of tolling, but I'm saying that it has disintegrated so badly that I think something needs to happen at this point in time. Although I am also saying that I appreciate, for example, Representative McLean's work on this effort for such a long time. And I'm sure that this is frustrating to her and her staff as well.
Commissioner William Rogers.
No, go ahead. I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's, I'm totally supportive of this particular action of weighing in and supporting the bill. The difficulty, at least that I'm hearing from my particular end of the county, and I've heard it from other places, is that in a representative government like we have, and that's what we have here, or democracy with representative government, people think that they have an avenue to have their concerns addressed. They have a venue. It wasn't provided. And so they have legitimate concerns, Clackamas County does, cities along there, cities in my particular area have legitimate concerns about where the gantries are being placed, some of the language inside of the enabling legislation. They're saying, let's talk about it. And when you're told there is no meetings that are going to be held, there is no avenue to hear any of this, you not only get frustration, you almost get anarchy. And so now we're faced with IP4, which is a sledgehammer to an issue. And I know that funds are being raised. I know they're hiring consultants. And to me, that's not where we need to be. We need to have some thoughtful discussion amongst folks who are enlightened on what the topics are, and it'll attempt to at least have public hearings. So if we don't support something like this, what we're saying is that public testimony may not be necessary when we don't think it's important, or other people are going to make that decision. And I can tell you that incenses people. And I think the chair is exactly right in her comments, and her frustration is that's what makes people mad. They had a bunch of hearings. They could have taken testimony and still gotten to the same point, but at least people said, well, it was heard. Now they feel completely unheard. So you have a whole bunch of representatives from down in the Wilsonville, Tigard, Sherwood area who are supporting it. 31 folks signed on. I can tell you that there's at least another 30 who would support. So there's probably 60 some legislators all saying the same thing. Let's pause. Let's get it right. It's not going to affect anything. I'm not against tolling either for the I-5 bridge. I question it on, I have to be honest, on 205 on Abernathy, because I haven't seen all the funding, but it may be necessary there as well. But we do irreparable damage to the bedrock of democracy when representatives and government fail to listen to the public. And So that's why you get the initiative process. And I don't think we want to be there. I just think we want to say, let's have a pause, let's hear it. You may come to the same conclusion, but you've been heard. That's the bigger issue. And Aaron, can I say one more thing, Aaron, before? I understand from your note from Courtney that both the president of the Senate, the who else besides the 31 on the bill, but Rob Wagner, I know he's been talking with the chamber in Tualatin, and he's very sympathetic to the situation. Who else is supporting the at the leadership role, this particular bill or deference?
I would say that there has been actually not a lot of support from the leadership because of opening up polling statutes causes a ripple effect into the transportation funding streams that were expected in the region. And I also, as you were all talking, had an update come through on my phone of news articles confirming that Tech has in fact paused tolling on I-205. So that being said,
But for how long? Like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or some milestone or what?
just one moment. Sorry, my phone closed itself and I was trying to listen so I could capture comments that the commission wants to make if we are moving forward until January 2026. So for 2 years.
Yeah, okay, great.
So, and it says
That's
that
very helpful.
the Oregon
So it just
Department of
came through. She's
Transportation
confirmed this.
is working on a plan. And so, yeah, I won't read the rest of the article.
No,
But
that's
so
perfect.
there's confirmation that we have 2 years. There will be a further public process beyond what the Oregon Transportation Commission has done and the variety of other committees that have been merely advisory, not public committees. So that conversation will move forward, and hopefully ODOT has a plan for the rest of the financing for the rest of the bottleneck projects and other regional projects that need funding at this point in time.
Great, really good update. If I could add 2 additional comments. One is that I hope that I think the governor's office should draw upon OTC and ODOT resources and produce a short document that explains what all these different committees are doing related to tolling,
Agreed.
congestion pricing, because it's complicated as all get out and it's too hard.
And
And then, wait. And then the second thing is, in talking to our Tri-County Chairs meeting yesterday, Monday night, was just Chair Smith and myself. And she was asking me questions to gather information because she was hearing people position that, well, Washington County got funding for Highway 217 improvements from HB 2017, and they didn't have to do tolling. So what I explained to her is that there were no new lanes, that the improvements on 217, Highway 217, as a result of House Bill 2017, were the emergency breakdown lane improvements that we're seeing under construction now and the Allen Boulevard, Denny Boulevard interchange. There were no additional through lanes, capacity lanes whatsoever, unlike I-205, Abernathy Bridge replacement, and these tolling programs and so forth. So just wanted to make sure you got a heads up on that.
So, Erin, isn't there a new OTC leadership? Didn't
Yes,
Bob-
2 members. So there have been nominations for 2 seats on the Oregon Transportation Commission. I don't have those names off the top of my head. It got buried in things. The chair of the Oregon Transportation Commission did step down. I think he's looking to actually retire. And there was another vacancy that needed to be filled, and the governor is working on that appointment process, which has to be confirmed by the Senate in order to move forward. I will get you those names and include that update on Friday.
Thank you.
Okay. when we get to the Q&A section, I know I have some other questions related to land use, but I'll just wait
Okay.
until the Q&A section.
I'm happy to wait till then. So that is this slide. So with that, move to-
Can I just have, I'm not hearing that we took a position, but we didn't take. We understood that there was no need to take a position. So, I mean, how are we going to articulate? And I think we articulate that we heard it, but we understood that there was no position to be taken.
We are pleased to see the Oregon governor's executive order pausing the tolling work until January of 2026.
I think that's a great statement and with no need to take a position because it sounds like it's been fixed. So,
Well, I just didn't like the way that Representative McLean was kind of kicked to the curb on this, and I think we need to at least reach out and make sure that she understands that we support her hard work that she's been putting in on this and the bridge replacement. So I just want to make sure we're sending a good message to her. So maybe she didn't like this, maybe she wasn't, it doesn't sound to me like she was even talked to about this, but again, nobody likes to be blindsided, and I just want to make sure that we communicate support to her.
What are your thoughts, Erin?
The conversation writ large around concerns around polling has been very vocal amongst members of the elected body at the legislature. She was aware of the work. I don't know what the level of communication between the governor's office and Representative McLean were related to the governor's actions today, but this is not a conversation that hasn't been had amongst the membership, is my understanding, that there's been a lot of discussion about concerns coming out of 205. So I can check in with Representative McLean, but also express the commission's support for her ongoing hard work to find solutions as we have this 2-year pause, if that's acceptable.
I think my support for this governor's executive pause, I'll call it that, to distinguish it from the homelessness stuff as we've been kicking around Governor Kotek's executive orders, is just as a result of the community having so much angst and controversy over this, particularly in South County. That in no way does it, to me, diminish the work that Representative McLean has been doing. So I don't feel like, I haven't heard additional reinforcement needed there at all. So, but, yeah.
Okay.
I think we're ready to move on.
Okay. Next slide, please. So in the world of economic development, the Strategic Investment Program and Gain Share Conversation had an informational hearing about proposed changes that would both modernize the SIP portion of a SIP and gain share arrangement and then change the cap in a way that is unacceptable to Washington County. So House Bill 3457 is a proposal for making significant changes to the process around SIP agreements, some of which is aligned with the direction that Washington County would like to see. In particular, it would raise and then index the threshold for the baseline amount that is subject to property taxes. So that currently 100, oh wow, my brain just short-circuited there, the $150 million that is currently taxable, and then we have the SIP abatement that sits on top of that. It would $100 million. It would index that or raise it up and then index in years moving forward, so that that base amount that is subject to straight property tax changes from year to year based on standard indexing using the inflation index. And that would change both for rural and for urban and all sizes of SIP agreements and investment. Included in that, however, are some other provisions that we need to work with the legislature on that bring more people to the table that have to agree to and sign on to proposed SIP agreements, which can complicate the negotiations and give veto power to smaller taxing districts, which is there has to be a way to move forward, and we're working to find that way to move forward in ways that don't subject us to lack of autonomy and authority in that conversation. And the most concerning piece of all of the second recommended changes sits with the change to the gain share cap. The bill amendment proposes capping it at $5 million, which is obscene. I'm probably more blunt than I need to be today. That is unworkable and unacceptable from the position of Washington County to see a $10 million or $11 million reduction in the cap. We have made it very clear to the proponents of the amendment that that is a non-starter as far as conversation. And in fact, we should be looking at raising the cap, and pointed out that the cap, if it were not in place, would sit in a, we would be collecting approximately $52 million in gain share dollars without the cap. And we're not saying we need to go to that, but we need to lift the cap and index it so that it has proportional value to the amount of general fund income that comes to the state. So that conversation is ongoing. We do have plenty of advocates that we are working with to undo that mindset that is tied to where we were in 2007, and the expected revenues from any given SIP agreement said that the gain share payments would probably cap out at $4 million, which clearly is not at all how effective we have been with the SIP tool for bringing the state $141 million in revenue. So that conversation is ongoing. We do have advocates in the legislature who are working with us, both elected and with other stakeholders, to move that forward. And that is included in Senate Bill 1084, which right now is just drafted with a straight extension of 10 years for gain share, but we are looking to include language that would increase and index the gain share payment as well. The negotiations between House Bill 3457, Senate Bill 1084, and a variety of other local incentive packages that may or may not include the regionally significant industrial sites, enterprise zones, and long-term rural enterprise zones are all being negotiated as they also negotiate related to everything else that the Semiconductor Task Force had recommended. So this conversation is ongoing. The story that we are telling is being heard by some, but is not being heard by folks who just see Washington County pulling down $16 million year over year and feeling that that is
Washington
somehow.
County government does not pull down 16 million a year. We need to really emphasize that.
I do emphasize that whenever I speak to anyone that that $16 million is spread across a variety of taxing districts that all need that funding, not just Washington County, and that in fact, Washington County as a county sees a diminishing amount of that money coming to us year over year.
So since we have media reporters listening to our work sessions, I want to make sure everybody knows that all of the taxing districts in Washington County that receive gain share dollars are in that total pool of $16 million. And the county agency itself has gotten 9 million of that 16 million. So 9/16. It's not you, Aaron. It's the audience.
I
that
think
needs
it's
to hear it.
I think it's smart to reiterate that, Chair. Aaron, could I ask who's supporting this?
The draft amendment was put forward by the Revenue Chair, Nancy Nathanson, representative out of Lane County, Eugene area.
Out of Lane.
Mr. Carr, thank you for resharing with us the 2006 Washington County policy on SIP. Through the prior SIP enabling as well as through this current legislation, are we required to adopt a strategic investment plan program?
Don't think so.
No,
So I think the limits being discussed are a joke. $5 million. 9/16 of $5 million is 2.6 million, if I did my math right. And these modernization of caps for SIP to me is not grounded in what this equipment and these equipment investments are. So this is all very troubling. It's like saying something is a valuable resource when it really isn't. So, not good, not good at all. Oh, and Commissioner Rogers has a question.
Okay, my question is that Friday seems to be an important date for certain bills. Can you tell me what does happen or doesn't happen on that date with these two
Sure.
particular items?
Sure. So the second chamber deadline is for scheduling work sessions is on Friday, which means that bills that are in policy committees, subject to the deadline, have to have a work session scheduled in order for a bill to move forward this session. However, it's very important that phrase policy committees subject to the deadline. When it comes to revenue committees and the joint ways and means committees, those are not subject to the same deadline. They work through the session and can schedule a work session at any time. With both of these bills that are on the table, that are on the slide related to sip and gain share, they then have to go from whichever, either the Senate Finance and Revenue Committee or the House Revenue Committee. They then go to the Joint Tax Expenditure Committee, which then is also not subject to the deadline that is coming up on Friday. So the deadlines do not impact these bills.
So what time frame do these bills have to have some action in order to move to the other chamber?
Because they go down to the Joint Tax Expenditure Committee, they do not have to go from one chamber to the other. They just have to go to both floors. Sorry, I should have been clearer about that. And they are therefore subject to the sine die deadline.
Yep. Okay, so Mr. Carr, I would ask, just as one of five, also if legally the state legislature can impose limits on our property taxes or not. So because who knows which way this legislation is going to go. What my individual perspective is the SIP tool can be a very valuable tool for economic development support. But as a result of adopting a strategic investment program proposal, we are foregoing property tax revenue for this county as well as other taxing districts within the geographic area. And that's a pretty serious situation, especially we're not unique in rubbing up against the limits imposed by Measure 547 and 50. Other governments here in Washington County are experiencing that too. And so I think that's the message that we're trying to get our legislators to appreciate, that the definitions of these programs back in the 1990s needs to be modernized so that it can support governmental work here in the 2020s. And some of these figures are just based on assumptions. I'm concerned it's based on assumptions that others have of what Washington County receives year over year versus what we're losing out on. So that's fundamentally my concern, and I reserve the right to get smarter, more informed along the way.
My comment was, I totally agree with those comments. When we did the original, and I was with, in fact, all the Intels and Genentech, we did that one too, but we understood clearly that we were going to tax buildings and land at 100%, just like any homeowner. The difference between me at home where I buy a refrigerator or a couch, I don't get taxed. Personal property, business does. So we were trying to make provisions for that massive equipment. So we all understand that history. And so we went through and then we said, gee, state, you were in here, and they had governors here. They were lobbying like crazy. We said, well, we forego property taxes, you get income taxes. We should claw a little of that back. And that's what we called gain share. But I would submit, and that's Roy talking, nobody else. You got a brand new set of legislators, governor, and a lot of people saying, gee, we'd like to use this CHIPS Act and cite various facilities. What's the incentive when you're using valuable land to site facilities who are only going to pay a fraction of really what their cost is doing? So I think they need to look holistically. This is a bigger problem than just a little bit of revenue. This is citing of new facilities, local governments getting it on the chin, and state governments getting the income tax off of it. So it's a complete package. So I agree with your comments. It needs to be really looked at. And as far as the state regulating what we can charge or not charge for taxes, they'd say, you don't have to take any personal property taxes out. We'll still take the income taxes. If you want to exempt them, I suppose we could, but I don't think that's fair to the property tax payers of Washington County. They need to be feeling like there's some benefit to doing these sorts of things. So anyway, that would be my opinion. I'll stop.
I agree with both of you. But I also think that I'd like to hear what the governor's office is thinking about this as well, because the governor's office is the group that's really been pushing hard with the CHIPS Act and everything else. I would guess that they might have, they're the people that we should be talking to as well.
And those conversations are taking place, and a lot of conversations are taking place across a lot of different avenues. There are definitely legislators as well as the governor's office who understand there is a lot that has to happen if CHIPS money is to be spent here, and that it has to look at it a holistic package. It's just some people sit with gavels, and we have to have conversations about how to be effective and recognize the contribution of local governments to the ecosystem, to not just build incentive packages, but to build communities that are where people want to locate. And that's what we do with revenue, is we build those communities and those structures. And that's the messaging that we have taken into the revenue committee, and those members that we're talking to, in trying to make them recognize that all of the tools will only be effective if we can use them in a way that is appropriate to our needs to serve our community. And that it is our choice whether or not we enter these agreements.
So I'm not interested in they're just extending the time frame and retaining the same caps that are in place today. I've said it before, but I think given these really low numbers that have been talked about, accepting the status quo just is not a reasonable approach either. Just between us Washington County folks.
Would it be fair to say it's not fair to us or our taxpayers?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So, okay, we will stay tuned.
Yes, I will continue to keep you updated as these conversations continue. The second half of the slide is related to broadband. This morning, there was a hearing. Sorry, did someone have something?
No, Commissioner Willie's look, you want to wait?
No, yeah, I was asking Pam if she had her little cloth.
I think I might.
Things are.
Oh, that's okay. I couldn't tell if I had interrupted.
We're doing personal hygiene here.
It's fine. It's comfortable. Thank you. So on broadband, there was a hearing this morning that gave some indication that there are further amendments to House Bill 3201 that have been negotiated by all parties. I still have not seen a summary of those negotiations and outcomes, but the expectation for those stakeholders that represent local government and our desire to be part of the solution of having underserved and unserved areas served using federal funding, that the amendments work for continuing to see progress come out of the state process that then allows us to pull down all of the federal dollars that were available for and use them in the manner that is acceptable to the federal programming from the notice of funding availability that we've seen. So that's good news. I will provide more details on what those amendments exactly do and what the total conversation is. I just don't have those amendments in hand. They have not been finalized in their drafting.
So I was looking at my papers. There is a set of amendments that is good. I think it was -4, but then there's some other amendments beyond that have been made that, as I understand it, though I left my notes upstairs, would block us, oh, thank you, so I don't drop my laptop on the floor, would block us from being able to reach underserved areas because it would count all of the households between where the node is and the area we're trying to serve, and would require us to count all the direct households in the corridor to get to them. And as I understand it, and this is definitely not my area of strength, that would, so the amendments beyond -4 that just dropped would cause us severe heartburn, specifically around Section 7 with the service routes.
So none of those amendments that have been dropped and made public are being considered. The amendment that was agreed to is not yet been published because they had not finalized drafting of it. So when I review and provide, yeah, it's that time of session. So I'm familiar that there's a lot of concern with like the -6 amendment that addresses a lot of different things. So here is my.
I may be speaking on the wrong one. I
Okay.
may have oh, no, I was right, 3201. Yes, thank
32,
you.
that's the broadband.
Yeah,
bill.
yeah.
So
Yep.
my commitment to you, board, is to, once I see the amendments, I believe it might be either a -8 or a -10, which just tells you how many iterations there have been that have not been made public, because they weren't what anybody agreed to. Once I have those, I will provide that analysis in the GR weekly update. And so you'll have clarification about how the proposed amendments do not harm our ability to service those that need to be reached.
Sounds good, Erin. Thank you.
Okay, with that, next slide, please. So there is a draft letter that is included in the packet, and we are now looking for the board's generalized thumbs up, or if there are edits beyond. Commissioner Chair Harrington, I did see your catch of a couple of things, and now I've lost my emails at this point because I only have one tiny screen. There is one typo that you caught, which I had not noticed when I read it back to myself. But also on page 4 of the letter, you had suggested changing the language around the gain share payments to all counties using this program and increase the cap or indexes to inflation. And you requested that the word "or" be changed to "and." And you had also requested the 1995 established, but this is in reference to the gain share cap, not the SIP cap and threshold.
Oh, I had the date wrong then.
So
Right.
those were set in 2015. So I would
Yes,
recommend that
yeah.
if you were to adopt that, increase the 2015 established cap and index it to inflation so that we can continue to partner in creating
Yes.
family wage jobs across the
Yeah.
state. So that would be the recommendation. Those were the changes
Yes.
that the chair had brought. With that, I'm happy to have a further discussion about what is also needing fixes that other commissioners had thought, or else looking for a generalized thumbs up to continue finalizing the letter with those changes in mind and have the chair sign it so we can submit it for testimony tomorrow.
I thought it was a terrific letter. I really appreciate how it enumerates all the different asks, includes bill references, makes it very clear in the way you've categorized things of, it's very easy to see the benefit of these potential investments. So really well done. Really well done. Did everyone catch that wording change that we were talking about on gain
Or to
share?
and.
Increase the cap and the indexes?
Yeah.
Okay, to inflation. Okay. And then that other thing was the second to the last paragraph. Got it. Okay. Any other comments on the letter?
The only comments that I'd make, first of all, it's a good letter. I agree. I read it. I don't have it for me, but I read it earlier. Just for future reference, there's nothing we can do at this point. The huge mistake that we made back several years ago is we should have indexed it based upon the indexing of the income tax that was being gained. Gain share was supposed to say, give us some of our property taxes back because you're getting so much income tax. I would surmise that if we were to take a look, if we could trace it, the income taxes that are coming off of those investments, it would be huge in comparison to the property taxes. A little bit of clawback we're getting there. So I think this is a very modest ask. I think it's a very simple ask. And it sort of incenses me that we were trying to be so reasonable at the time and never really indexed it to the income tax. We were indexing, trying to do a little indexing on the property taxes. And here we find ourselves and people trying to cut with a little bit. We did. We gave so much to the state, and I'll stop, but I went impassioned because we gave so much to the state, so much to Washington County. And then to have someone come back and say, not enough, we're going to cut you down. And it wasn't just the county, it was City Hillsborough and others. I mean, we gave up a lot, and we thought it was for the goodness of Oregon. So it's not a good position to be in.
Okay.
Letter, yes.
Yep, you got 4 thumbs on the letter.
Thank you.
And I think now, do you want us to bring questions up now or wait?
Let's do it now so that we can spend the bulk of the time. And Tucker, I want to do a time check for you. You might need to run.
Yeah, I'm going to step off. Thank you, commissioners, for your words today, and be connecting with you next time before the board, or before then, if you want to call me up, feel free to do so. Thank you.
Well, I had to remind myself during our earlier conversation, as I was struggling to follow the conversation of different bills, different amendments, different state of affairs. It's Catherine, this is the state legislature in late April and May. It always gets super busy. So thank you to the 2 of you for just absolutely excelling at what you do.
Thank you.
I'm not cut out for it. So
You have a different difficult job. So Chair, what are the questions around land use switch bills in particular?
So there are 3 bills that I have a question on, and then I know we have at least another letter to talk about.
Yes.
So House Bill 3414. Oh, there goes my laptop. This one has to do with, I have to bring it up again. I'm sorry.
I'm familiar with the bill. If you would like me to summarize, Chair Harrington, what I
Yes,
understand.
please
the bill to do.
summarize it for all of us. That would be awesome.
House Bill 3414 has 2 major components to it. One undoes the traditional authority we have for granting variances when it comes to land use applications that do not meet our clear and objective standards for housing development. It would limit the ability for local government to not grant a variance unless very specific conditions or situations are the reason for denying the variance. This is a reversal of the current standard practice. If you cannot meet clear and objective standards that are established, you have to seek a variance. And we have discretion based on anything that we have to make findings on in order to grant or deny that variance. This bill would instead say, unless it meets one of these enumerated reasons for denying the variance, you must grant the variance. The other half of the bill establishes a new office that would have oversight over local governments that is a joint operation between the Department of Land Conservation and Development and the Oregon Housing and Community Services and the Oregon Department of Consumer and Business Services Building Codes Division that would basically analyze the work that we do. And if complaints were brought forward or they had their own concerns about how we are implementing land use or building codes laws as it relates to housing, to then make recommendations for enforcement against local governments. They would also be tasked with providing technical assistance if folks came forward voluntarily, or to work with us to amend codes. But it's another branch of government that would have oversight. So those are the two main components of House Bill 3414. This is being brought forward by the governor's office. Local governments, including Washington County, have expressed serious concern with this bill. Hopefully,
And-
Tara, gave you enough time to find your notes.
Yeah, well, and I did see a letter at one point where our logo was already on the letter. So what bothers me about this bill, and I think I'm looking at the -4 amendment, is within an urban growth boundary, a local government may not deny an application for a variance. And as it was explained to me, or shared with me, we've all done this work to support House Bill 2001, right? Middle housing. And so supposedly we have these clear and objective standards. This says that we can't deny an application for a variance. And it's not it imposes, as I understand it, a requirement on us and removes that local government control over how you've implemented your codes to satisfy state law. So that's my understanding. Are we already in opposition to this?
Yes, Chair, it violates multiple county principles.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure, because I can't keep track of all the different bills that, despite your efforts at Bill Tracker.
There's a lot.
Okay, so I'm comfortable with that you're on the case. On House Bill 3015, modernizing economic development zones. I read an article in Oregon Live from Sunday that raised my concern on that bill. Let's see, now I have to go find the bill. It just seems,
I think, Chair, you mean House Bill 3011?
no, I thought it was on 3015.
3015 is relating to pharmacy benefit managers.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely not that.
So House Bill 3011.
You're right.
So House Bill 3011, we've also been watching this. It's less directly impactful to the county and the work that we do unless we were to locally adopt enterprise zones within the county lands. But this is part of the overall conversation around modernizing, quote unquote, enterprise zone standards. And there are some pieces where this is where the League of Oregon Cities and the Oregon Economic Development Association have been partnering, and I've been sitting in on those conversations as we approach all of the local incentive programs as a comprehensive set of tools. So House Bill 3011 has been proposed to create a bunch of other changes to enterprise zones and long-term rural enterprise zones that have caused quite a significant number of concerns from the local government perspective. But there are like pieces around the SIP. There are pieces that are perhaps, opening up transparency that can be done with limited impact on local government's abilities to use the tools, but others that might be more concerning to local governments. But so again, stalling for time, Chair, are there, we do
So
not,
I found my screenshots of the article and they did in fact call it House Bill 3015. So thank you for correcting me as to it being 3011.
Mhm.
And it talked about making sure that data centers in the urban and suburban areas are ineligible for enterprise zone exceptions, which to me is the right way to go. Especially given all that has been enumerated in that article about the tax breaks provided and the small number of jobs that result. So then the last question I had on bills was House Bill 2756. I had expected Jim Long would be testifying at our meeting today. He sent us an email on Monday that talked about CPO 4M voting unanimously to support safety improvements on Hall Boulevard, but then he asked if the county is supporting House Bill 2756, and I didn't know the answer. And so I just figured I'd ask here.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. So to be clear, House Bill 2756 is currently written mandates that the state enter into an agreement to do a jurisdictional transfer of Hall Boulevard
Yeah,
to the
we're
city of
supporting
Tigard.
that. Yep.
We haven't engaged in the bill because the bill hasn't been scheduled for any conversation. I will also inform you that today it was posted that there be an amendment to the bill that would gotten stuff the term, or no, wait, just kidding. That was a different bill. Sorry.
I was like, what? Hall Boulevard, no.
So
Gets confused too.
in
yeah.
an effort to address the many ways we can approach bringing streets up to urban standards that sometimes are referred to as orphan highways, or oh, this is where I say artillery roads, but I mean a different word, and no, I can't get it.
Arterial.
Yes, very broken in the land use
You
world.
got a smile on all of her faces. That's
She's going,
wonderful.
she's losing it.
So yeah, I am a little bit losing it, to be honest. So there is a hearing that is up for the Hall Boulevard jurisdictional transfer, but I do believe that there is an amendment, and I'm trying to look at my notes right now. Not my notes. Okay.
Don't sweat it. Don't sweat it.
So
You've more than
unfortunately,
taken care of what I needed.
unfortunately, I am unable to be there in person or online to testify. So if the board wishes, we had not taken a specific position. There are some technical issues with the bill that I will bring to Rep. Bowman's attention, that they don't want all of Hall Boulevard. They want the portions within the city of Tigard to be transferred. But other than that, and if the board would so direct, I am happy to write a letter and put in our letter of support for that effort.
Well, I don't have a problem with their taking those portions of Hull Boulevard that are within the UPAA,
Might be.
right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a better. Aaron, I spoke to this group about it, but I also spoke at the R1 Act, and I commended the city of Tigard and ODOT for dealing with it, but I believe in complete streets. And I think Jim's, which I also read his letter, he's saying, how about the rest of it? And he's absolutely right. And it seems a little interesting that we would take a portion of a road and just stop and, because it's an imaginary county boundary right there. And the rest of it's incomplete, no sidewalks, ditches, and problems. And so he's right. He's just asking us, well, how about the rest? And unless we change our thoughts about complete streets, it seems that ODOT should look, and I asked them as well, why don't you look, what are you going to do for the rest? I mean, you may not do it today, but what's your plans for the rest?
I will always say that every state dollar tends to come with an obligation for local funds. So there's also a conversation for the board there to have that is beyond my.
I understand. The planning
Okay.
isn't, the planning doesn't necessarily mean that we commit dollars. It means that they've been thoughtful in looking at a complete street. Right? I mean, you just don't sit there and say, I'll take this chunk of it and that's all I'm gonna plan or look at it. God help you, maybe 50 years from now, you'll look at the rest. I mean, they look at it all and say, if you can match or you can do something in the future, great. But I just don't think you cut off, like cutting a freeway in the middle of nowhere. And so that's just my thoughts, just as one.
Is your point, sorry, I'm a little slow today. Is your point that you don't want improvement, future opportunities for seeking money for improving the roadway to be blocked because it's already been transferred?
No, thank you. No, I completely agree with the Tiger portion of it going, but I think ODOT in their planning wouldn't cost them that much to say, here's what we're gonna plan to do the rest, and it may be future funds that we both have to cobble together. But they plan out and develop a complete street pattern. So it just has to be implemented, much like we might develop where a road is, but we have a Jersey barrier because we just don't have the money to do the rest. And there's no Jersey barrier because the street's there. But I said, well, what's the plan for the rest of it? I mean, do you have a plan? What's it going to look like? Do you have a date in mind when you might even look at doing the rest of it?
I think they're so far over obligated at this point that
I know, but we can always push a little bit. And that's, I think, Jim's point. He said, what are you thinking? I've told Jim, we just don't have the money, but I think it's a good idea to at least plan that everybody agrees.
Hmm.
And I talked with Ryan, and Ryan said, well, if you guys will come up with the money, we're always willing to talk. I said, well, we've got probably 10 or 15 bucks. What do you got? You got the rest of it? I mean, it's so I'm being facetious, but yeah. So I don't know what that's worth, but as far as Jim, I'll just tell him personally what I want to say, that there's no money for it, but it's a good idea that we plan on complete streets, whatever they're doing on the Tiger side and Tiger's doing. We got a plan for about the same sort of improvements. Could be 10 years, 15, 20, I don't know, but you know, there's some thought from this to it all.
okay.
Okay. So.
Oh,
can
one
go
more
through-
letter.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want to do the letter or the last minute explanation of the deadlines that I've already provided?
Could we go to the letter, please?
Please, absolutely.
And Commissioner Rogers, I think you asked a really good question. In light of all of our asks in the Ways and Means letter, by signing on to that Hillsborough Hubs letter, aren't we competing against ourselves? Is the question, my understanding.
How
of
much
the
money's
question-
there and are we competing? You can only ask so many asks. I mean, it'd be like going to our congressional delegation and said, I got 52 projects, and they said, give me 2 or 3. I mean, I'm not objectionable if there's lots of money, but I'm just trying to understand.
So what do you think?
Chair Hunting, Commissioner Rogers, the the Ways and Means letter that comprehensive letter touches on a ton of different funding sources. So where we directly compete with any other ask that is made of the legislature for a particular project is in the lottery bonds bill. That is where we are asking for the CAT funding from. We have in the past
The what funding?
the CAT, the Center
CAT.
for Addiction Treatment.
Well,
Those
we're
mon-
also asking under economic development for them to recapitalize 75 million. So
The
that's another ask.
there's a lot of, so there's the dollars that sit in a variety of pools, some of which are lottery dollars, that then get put into state budgets, for example, capitalizing the Special Public Works Fund or the not that they're looking to capitalize the broadband funds, but paying for the broadband office. Some of those requests are related to general obligation bonds. So in the housing world, we see a lot of those general obligation bonds to do those capital construction type projects. But where they do a designation of projects that are not owned and operated by the state is in the lottery bond bill that is sometimes referred to as the Christmas tree bill because they put all their pretty ornaments on it. That is where the CAP funding request comes in, is in that bill, which would eventually probably be, I believe it's Senate Bill 5030. Previously, the commission has agreed to sign on to and submitted a letter in support of the Family Justice Peace Center that would be similarly competing for funds. And then this is an additional ask, a much more significant ask that would also be added to that bucket of competing for those lottery-backed bond dollars that would be in Senate Bill 5030. So the approach that has been taken thus far when we've been approached by others asking for support of their projects is to say, while we prioritize our project, we also support development funding, what be it related to this other project that takes place and serves our community. $25 million in this expected revenue forecast is a big amount of money compared to most traditional asks. It's smaller, it's bigger than our CAT ask, it's bigger than the Family Justice Peace Center ask. So that's just to contextualize the size. We don't fully know what the expected revenue availability would be for these bonding projects until we get that May 17th forecast out of the state economist's office. And then they'll know kind of what the high level numbers would be for expected revenues that could be used to fund these projects.
So I'm still not sure. I'm sorry, but can you tell me if, help me again understand if this is in competition with CAT and
It would be in competition with CAT.
okay, thank you. I just want to, I thought that's what you were saying. Thank you.
Yes.
What was the Family Justice Peace Center ask?
We had submitted a letter that this board had reviewed, and they are looking to build a permanent facility in Washington County, and we wrote a letter in support of their request as well.
That's my question is,
think
what
it's-
is the dollar amount?
Oh, the dollar amount? Sorry, it's gonna give me,
I think it's 5 million, isn't it, Aaron?
I'm before I say things like yes or no, I'm going to pull up the letter itself. I'm learning from my own mistakes.
Which really just puts a finer point on $25 million is a really big ask.
The
What? No, it's 8.3
What the? Mhm.
according to
I
this.
don't-
memo.
don't have a specific amount for the Family Peace Center, but
5 million, I think is.
I think 5
Sounds-
million feels familiar, so I'll say roughly $5 million and hedge my bet that way.
Many conversations I've had about this project. I should know this.
I mean, I don't have a problem with the Hups making the ask. I just don't think that we've got the bandwidth to outcompete ourselves.
Let me go back to KL and have that conversation. I think he's, I could use some baseball terms. He might have inside baseball on some other leads on this. They may be swinging for the fences, a whole bunch of terminology there, but let me go back to KL and have that conversation. And I don't, is there an urgency to this letter, Aaron?
A lot of the requests and need to be finalized. So if there is a legislator who is pushing this forward and putting it in to be considered, they are looking for letters of support as quickly as possible before that revenue forecast, because they are in the process of starting to make decisions about what is going to make it into a budget and what is not. So probably within the next week, they would want to have an answer. So we could come back next week and have this further conversation during your leadership communication.
But we're going to get our own Ways and Means letter sent off forthwith,
Correct.
right? Got
Yes,
it.
it will go into the OLIS system. It is, since you have given us the thumbs up, we'll make sure it gets signed and delivered ASAP.
We did that already, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we did. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
it's still on the slide, but we already did it.
Does anybody else have any other bills you have questions on or letters? We did everything we were hoping to do. Thanks for hanging in there with us, Aaron.
Not a problem. The remaining
lot.
slides are slides that you've seen before, but essentially we've discussed the deadline that the policy committees have to have things scheduled for their work session. And we will come back to your board, I believe later this month, and then we will try to get through the remainder of session.
Wow, so we'll find out about the state's forecast before we have to adopt our own budgets. Yeah, okay. $50,000 questions. All righty.
Thank
Good
you
job.
all.
Thank you.
Holy jamoly, it's a hopping session, as they all are, Catherine. Okay, we're going to turn to a completely different topic. How are we doing relative to a break? We're a-okay, right?
We can just get up and go if we need to.
Okay, great. So we're going to move over to the Beaverton Enterprise Zone Reauthorization presentation. Because we have two folks here who've been waiting very patiently. Thank you.
Other rec dev guys, you know, they don't have much to do anyway, so it's just kind of kicking around the afternoon.
Don't
I always
listen.
like coming west. It's just,
Yeah,
it's been such an engrossing discussion. We've really enjoyed
it's
being
been
here.
interesting.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Board of County Commissioners. For the record, my name is Matt Cree. I'm Washington County's Economic Development Manager. Joining me today is Bill Berg, the City of Beaverton's Business Development Manager. And today we're going to be talking about reauthorization of Beaverton's Enterprise Zone. So enterprise zones, I'll just give a quick intro to Bill here, and then he has a number of slides, and then we can take questions and discussion. So enterprise zones are widely used in Oregon as a tool to encourage new investment in select areas. In exchange for locating or expanding into enterprise zones, an eligible business receives an exemption on the property taxes normally assessed on new buildings and new equipment. The exemption covers a minimum of 3 years and may extend up to 5 years. Land, existing buildings, and existing equipment continue to be subject to taxation. The Beaverton Enterprise Zone was designated in 2012 and expanded in 2013 to include 2 areas in unincorporated Washington County. The current enterprise zone expires on June 30th, 2023. That's the end of next month. As an Oregon statute required step in the process for reauthorization of the existing enterprise zone, the City of Beaverton needs a resolution from the Board of County Commissioners expressing support for the City of Beaverton's enterprise zone as currently configured. This resolution is required because of these 2 areas that are in unincorporated Washington County. No change to the current enterprise zone boundary configuration is being proposed. Should your board support reauthorization, staff is prepared to come back to a board meeting on May 16th with a consent agenda item. So as you will hear in Bill's presentation, the City of Beaverton's enterprise zone has had a total of 6 projects in its first 10 years. The performance of these investments has been substantial. These 6 projects have resulted in the following: over 270 new jobs with average wages over $55,000 a year, over $20 million in total investment, and over $8.5 million in assessed value of new improvements, in addition to a community service fee to the City of Beaverton that supports job creation and economic development. The authorization of the Beaverton Enterprise Zone would support additional economic growth in Washington County and further our partnership with the City of Beaverton. So again, the policy question for your board today is about whether the board supports reauthorization of the Beaverton Enterprise Zone as currently configured. And with that, Bill, I'll turn it to you. And again, we've made sure that we have some time at the end for discussion. Great. Thank you, Matt. And Chair Harrington and Commissioners, good to see you. Matt pretty much covered a lot of what I've got on the slide, so we can go through this pretty quick. The goals for today are really to provide you with kind of a background on our specific enterprise zone in Beaverton. There are a number of communities that have them in Washington County. Well, not a number, there's a few: Hillsborough, Forest Grove, Tigard, Lake Oswego. We'll talk a little bit about how that's performed. We'll look at our enterprise zone boundaries and particularly the 2 areas, excuse me, the 2 small areas of Washington County that are included in that zone. I had a couple of slides in there as implications for, what has the performance of the zone been in terms of implications for the taxing districts that are having their taxes abated, and there's quite a bit of information about that. And then the timeline for reauthorization, which is mostly driven by statute. I mean, I've been on kind of a train. Once you get started, you have X number of days to do this, and you can't do this before this number of days. So we're trying to meet all those deadlines. So the ask respectfully of the Washington County Board is that on 5/16, you consider approving a consent resolution,
which is one of the requirements that I need from you because there are a couple of areas of unincorporated Washington County that are included in our enterprise. So that's why I am here. The basics Matt covered. The program has been around as an economic development incentive since 1985, and it is the standard program provides 3 years of a property tax abatement with an option to extend for 2 more years beyond that. It's important to note that land and existing improvements continue to be taxed at current values, so there's no reduction in taxes as a result of this. There are definitely qualifications and requirements of the businesses that take advantage of this incentive. They must, at a minimum, increase their full-time employment by 10% and maintain that during the entire exemption period, or there's a clawback of those abated taxes. There are also average wage and benefit requirements for new hires. The businesses are required to post all of their job openings through WorkSource Oregon. They're not required to hire through them, but they're required to at least look at post the jobs and go through that process. And then we have some local overlays on top that we're allowed to do. One of those is we have a requirement for a procurement plan for the business to make a good faith effort to procure its goods and services from Beaverton businesses. And they have to report on that every year to us in terms of how that performance is going.
Where I have questions, the map.
Okay, the map. Other than it being smaller than you could probably see.
Exactly, but I have them here on my screen.
Okay, good.
So
The map on the left is the city of Beaverton with our famously weird boundaries. And then the enterprise zone is shaded within that and runs roughly, the west to the south there. The middle picture is an expanded view of that. What's contained in that enterprise zone is almost all of our industrial and light manufacturing office zoned properties. So over the years, we've added bits and pieces to that. So now it's fairly full of most of that particular type of land that can be used for the types of businesses that are eligible for enterprise zone incentives. The map on the far right is an expanded view of the 2 areas of Washington County, unincorporated Washington County, that are somewhat surrounded by Beaverton, but are still Washington County. Namely, you would know those as Nike and the Tektronix campus. Those are the 2 areas. Essentially, they were added back in 2013, so 10 years ago, which is before my time. So I don't have a lot of anecdotal evidence about why, but it makes sense that they're contiguous to Beaverton and can be used to incentivize redevelopment in those 2 spaces if they happen. Did you want to ask questions now, or would you like to wait?
I just wanted to make sure that in the presentation, we were clear on what those 2 areas are.
Okay,
That's
all right.
Commissioner Treese was asking me, for the sake of everyone in the room, Commissioner Treese was pointing out that this is near my home. And yes, each of these is right across the street from where I live.
Yes, and me as well. I'm close to these as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I thought it would be good to give you an idea of how the Beaverton enterprise zone has performed. We've read about in the papers, as you noted, the article recently on data centers and such. There are some concerns in various areas about some of the performance. Our enterprise zone has actually done pretty well, I think, in terms of the types of businesses and the return on, I'll call it ROI, return on investment of the abated property taxes. But so far, over that 10 years, there's been 6 companies that have been using the enterprise zone. I've actually listed their names here. And as I don't know if you're familiar with these or not, but it's a pretty broad spectrum of company types. ProBuild is a construction sort of business, construction materials. Vernier Software is probably the best known of the bunch. They do scientific equipment for education. Virtual Supply is a distribution company. C2F is again a distribution company for art supplies. Vanguard is an electronic manufacturer, and Cedia Biosciences is a bioscience company. So we've got a pretty good range of companies. In terms of performance, over the years, 274 employees added, average wage, as Matt noted, 56,000, almost 57,000. The total investment cost of improvements that have been put into the zone is north of $20 million. The total amount of taxes abated under 600,000, 558, I think. I can't read that from me. Average employment growth per company They're only required, as I said earlier, to raise their employment by 10% or one employee if they've got a very small number of employees. Most of those have far outperformed that base level requirement. Average tax abatement per company is about 93, and the real interesting one is average tax abatement per new employee is right at around $2,000, which is pretty good. I mean, you're not reading things like 40,000 or 20,000 or even 10. We've had workforce training programs that were $2,500 per employee. So this is actually a well-performing incentive for us. And then I have a graph of the total tax abatement per year. This one's a bit of an eye chart, but you can read it if you're interested in specifics. I thought I would have you take a look at or be exposed to, what does it mean per taxing district in terms of how much abatement per year are they seeing for this, specifically for the Beaverton Enterprise Zone. So if you look on the far left, that's the tax year. If you read across from left to right, you'll see the total abatement for each of those years, and based on the tax rate per taxing district and their percentage of the total abatement, which is the ratio of their tax rate to the total amount of abated taxes per tax rate, you'll see the amount of abated taxes per business or per taxing district per year. So if you're Washington County, I would think would be of particular interest. In 2022, which is the latest year, $5,846 was abated, for a total over all 10 years of right under $80,000. So again, not a huge amount, relatively speaking, but it does incentivize business growth. It's difficult to estimate going forward. I had some of the representatives of taxing districts ask me, well, what do you think is going to happen in the next 10 years? And it just depends on the businesses that decide to take advantage of the tax incentive. Not all businesses do. I mean, we've had a number of businesses that have just not, for whatever reason, and they have a number of different reasons. We advertise it as part of our outreach efforts. We make sure businesses are aware of it, but it's really up to them whether or not they want to take advantage of that tax abatement. But what I've got here on this slide is on the left-hand side there are a number of what ifs ranging from $1 million of investment to $20 million. Investment levels, I just computed the amount of abated taxes per taxing district given your current tax rates. And so you get an idea that if a $5 million investment came in at Washington County's current tax rate, which hopefully I've got close to correct, it would be about a $14,500, $300 or $500 per year abatement. Just to give you a feel. And the city of Beaverton in total taxable assessed value is 11. There's 3 extra zeros. That's $11 billion. Why I didn't put the 3 zeros, I have no idea. We are, like I said, most of this is, a train that has left the station, and these dates are important. The green arrow has moved since we're now in May 2nd. I'm here talking to you all as a step towards hopefully getting your approval on that consent resolution. Tonight, our city council on consent votes on the same. We need to have a consent resolution from our own city council. And then on the 10th, the Port of Portland, which we are also required to have a consent resolution for. This comes before their board. The 16th, I've got in here as hopefully the date when you will take action. I need to have the application in by the 31st in order to make the month-long deadline that it takes the state to be able to review that and not have our enterprise expire on June 30th, which it is planning to do. But I think we're in reasonably good shape as far as getting things done.
One thing I don't understand is for this redesignation versus reauthorization. So given the number of taxing districts that you've had in the previous slides, which ones, and thank you for all this data, I really appreciate it. Given all these percentages, how many of the other taxing districts, including your own city, are you required to have a thumbs up support from?
There's only 3. Beaverton, as the sponsor of the zone, is required to have a consent resolution or a resolution of consent. And that's to consent to allow us to apply to Business Oregon for the redesignation.
Yeah, okay.
The other one is that is by statute is the Port of Portland. is required.
Oh, that's by
That was-
statute.
Yeah,
I was
they are,
scratching
we are
my
actually
head on
required to
that.
get, that was added, gosh, I don't remember when. I used to know when, but it's been a number of years that that's been on the books.
Wonder
and
if
then-
that has more to do with the city of Portland.
I think it was a specific request of the port
Mm.
because so many of these districts are encompassed by the port.
Oh,
They wanted to
yeah,
have some sort of
Yeah.
have at least come
make it
formally.
easier
before
for us to know that
Yeah.
it would happen. Got
And then,
it.
and then Washington County specifically, because of the two areas of Washington County that are not within the city of Beaverton as the sponsoring entity.
Okay,
Otherwise, I don't think we would require a consent resolution from Washington County,
okay.
but happy to be here.
Have you heard anything more from the other folks?
We did. I got written questions from TVFNR and let's see, from Tuolumne Park and Rec. One of their questions was about, does this impact our ability to charge SDCs? It does not. And there were just other questions about how much has been abated for our particular district over the years. So that I just sent them basically what I should do.
Yep. And to date, have most of these agreements gone 3 years or these 6? Or have they generally been 5-year?
They've all gone 5 years.
Okay.
There's a cost benefit of that. I mean, the risk to the company is they have to maintain their employment for that entire
Oh, right.
extra 2 years. So they have to trade that off with, the tax abatement they get in years 4 and 5. There's also a community service fee that we charge as a sponsoring government. It's now 5%. We're raising that to 20% in this iteration. That's a fairly small,
Want to cut?
well, if you saw how small the numbers were, you probably would ask why we're not raising them. Well, it was originally put in place in 2012 and times certainly changed as I.
Oh, well,
from listening to
imagine
your
if it was
discussion.
from 1995.
Yeah, way back, yeah.
Yeah.
I
No.
spared you the what if scenarios on the various fee things that we went through, but we landed on.
And I will hold my last question. Go ahead.
I was just curious about the Beaverton School District's viewpoint. I mean, obviously their numbers large
Mhm.
in relationship to the others.
Right. I didn't hear anything from the Beaverton School District. We're actually required as part of this process on the 24th of April. There was a consultation meeting that was again by statute required. And I sent out 52 certified letters to every taxing district and multiple representatives, which I think you all received at least one of those. And they were all invited to attend, and Beaverton School District did not, although they are still okay with sending written comments if they would like.
I was just curious.
Yeah,
It's a big number.
relatively speaking,
Yeah.
just, when you
Well-
look at any of these numbers in the overall, numbers sense, it's probably not huge.
How many attended?
No one.
No one.
Not even us.
You went 0 for 52.
Well, you have to hold.
2-0.
My feelings weren't too hurt because I figured, well, we did a great, they all saw pretty much this presentation and they saw the invitation letter, which explained it. So if there were no questions, somebody coming from far away to Beaverton City Hall in the middle of a Friday, whatever, or was it Monday? They can still ask questions.
So I have one last question. Given what I said earlier about data centers and economic development zones, given you're the part of the ECDev team with the city of Beaverton and therefore immersed in all things ECDev, what are the chances of these 2 Washington County areas out of your full Beaverton Enterprise Zone area landing data centers?
Well, I'm not a betting person, so I'm not sure I can answer that question because I really don't know. I think one of those you could probably imagine would not be a good candidate for a data center because it's already fairly fully developed. And the other one, I think it's still fairly small to be able to site a data center, and that's about as good of a guess as I can make right now. We
was
would
just
certainly
looking
push
for
for-
your educated guess and.
Yeah,
yours
and
is
in our
more than mine.
and I don't have a lot of experience with data centers because we don't have, the Beaverton thing. But the fact that we don't have any probably would lead me to believe that it's not likely that we're going to get any. That's, I'm not trying to kind of wave around your question, but that's as good as explanation as I can give.
And as a total aside, the Western Avenue redevelopment is coming along.
We can finally drive through there, which is a major benefit right now.
You have something to add, Missy?
Oh, I just wanted to let the board know that even though we didn't attend the consultation meeting, the signal that the two are here and Mr. Craigie has been working closely with Beaverton.
Oh, absolutely.
And thank you for the many letters you sent us.
Oh.
We were properly notified.
I'm happy to hear that. And yes, I was remiss in thanking Matt for his support and we've been in close contact on this and I've answered a few questions he's had. I think Washington County has had their input into the process. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Yep.
Well, going for the presumptive close, commissioners, are you ready for this to come to us May 16th on the consent agenda?
The only,
Thumbs up.
You bet.
the only thing I
A fan of enterprises.
So I think I found missing is Matt and I were talking and he said that you would be favorable to a gain share provision for Washington County. I didn't see that in here. Was that-
He's following your lead.
Oh, wow.
I've learned over the years not to wade into that end of the pool. I will
Gain share, come on.
You're a smart man.
survive.
This is where you say, are there any other questions?
I was just about to say, if there are no other questions.
Yeah, we-
Slide up.
Any sensible question, I mean.
No, they're all.
Back to the city council.
Yeah, I do want to take just a moment and say thank you so much for the work here because Beaverton has done a great job in focusing on economic development from all angles. And I know I've worked with you, Bill, for a long time. And I know you've been really dedicated and it shows in the growth and the way that Beaverton has expanded. And Matt, also, you're still sort of new here and sort of. But I really appreciate how well you
How
have
many
worked.
years has it been?
Just over two. I can't quite
that's
believe it,
relative
actually.
to you.
It's gone by fast.
I'm here longer than he is. But my point is that I really.
Let's hope it
appreciate-
stays that way.
I really appreciate the work that you do with our other economic development leaders throughout the county. And we haven't had that in our history here. So it's really important and it shows with just having both of you at the table.
Great.
So it's good work.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that. And yes, again, Matt does a great job of convening the local Washington County active folks. And we've worked through a lot of naughty things over the year. Naughty, A-N-O-T
Okay.
things. Gotta be careful. Complex. Are there any other questions?
Too, so don't.
Complex things, especially during COVID. And that was a time when all of us were scrambling and he did a great job of stepping in and really kind of keeping all the chickens and cats in the right place.
Yeah, it's been a very productive forum. It's been great to bring everyone together now monthly. Good. Yeah. So great. Thank you, Board of County Commissioners.
Wait, don't go away.
First, I have a serious question, not
Okay.
a gain share. Okay.
Okay.
Maybe I misunderstood. I was looking at the map and trying to understand your comments and boundaries. Is part of this outside the city of Beaverton? And I think it is. And if so, why isn't it annexed as part of the provision of doing this?
Just let me repeat the questions. Why isn't annexation part of the process, the requirement to take
Got this
advantage?
enterprise zone and you're asking us to participate in it. At least I, and I think others feel that the cities are the best provider of urban services. Why wouldn't this area be within the city of Beaverton, all of it?
It's not part of the statute for enterprise zones. It's not a requirement for the entitlement for the business. So I don't really know why. That's not a requirement.
Didn't you go there once before in relationship to Beaverton and Nike campus?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't there,
But
which
that's
is probably why I'm here.
They've got a different pocketbook, but I don't understand this.
I can't really comment, Commissioner, on why that's not part of it. It's
Well, related to that, but different. I think you have two of us who are encouraging that. But we need to get a UPAA drafted and done.
Yes.
And you're better off to do it with current 5 of us before the end of 24 than not.
But I would support that.
So you might want to take that back to the shop
I will take that message back.
because I finally remembered to bring it up. Thank
help.
you.
You're not saying just for this area, you're saying that the whole U.
The whole city
Yeah,
and
I
Washington
agree.
County.
I agree.
Yeah. We need to get back to it now that we're past COVID, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The COVID pause is over.
Any other questions? Not?
That's
Thank you
it.
all.
No,
Thank
you very much.
Take the rest of the day off, Bill. Don't worry about it, Matt. Go back to work.
Head straight back upstairs.
I will take that back as well.
Tanya knows I don't have that authority anyway.
You don't have that authority.
I could be.
But he wishes he was in his own bubble. Adding yours in.
As well as others.
Oh, and somehow we've made it to the end of our work session agenda, which I've already misplaced. So if we're not at the end of the agenda, you need to set me straight.
We are at the end. I did have one announcement. Chair, you had brought up earlier, CPO revisioning. It is next Tuesday work session. We were able to squeeze it in a bit
Good,
earlier.
good.
And if the board recalls, the meeting that was moved from the ADA policy was also needed to be moved out, and that is on June 9th. Meeting. Do I have, I think 6, sorry.
So both items are scheduled for next week. and
Oh,
then
they
we
were
just
both able to-
Have
Okay, good.
LUT's board and commission appointment on the Northwest Act, so we should be done by mid-morning next Tuesday and not have a need for the afternoon.
So they're both on for next week.
Cool.
Okay, and stay tuned. I hope we'll have more filled in a rolling agenda set for our June 1st roundtable.
And I just sent, by the way, for your information.
I haven't
just-
been on email all day, so
Well, I just sent a text to Megan asking her to notify CPO 1 or it's CPO 7. Remember, we talked about the re-envisioning and it got
Yeah.
postponed. So we're going to be, I want to make sure that that information is getting to them, that it's scheduled for next week. Remember that? It's just
Yeah,
like years ago.
yeah. Oh, but our work session is in the afternoon. It's not in the evening. I'm just having trouble keeping track of all the meetings. Sorry.
I
Of
moved
course,
it
I
be
was
adjourned.
having, it was obvious I was having trouble with dates too. So we're in the same boat.
Anything to do with numbers.
Well, and I think that brings us to the end of today's work
Oh,
session.
darn it. Now we get to go home and read the budget.
Which one?
Yeah, no kidding. The 6 budget documents that are on my desk.
I think Washington County's is pretty riveting, but I may be biased.
It is well.
Well, and after talking to Chair Smith last night, I appreciate our situation. Theirs isn't posted yet, but they have all of their budget committee meetings in 1 week.
Mm. Wow, that'd be from the fire hose. I don't know how you do that. Too much information.
Yeah. So I appreciate that ours are spread out. So, okay, we're adjourned. Bye.